Something big is about to happen. And here to discuss that something big is author Derek Gilbert from Skywatch TV. Hi, Derek. How are you?
Gary, it's an honor to be here.
I am holding your new book. It's called The Great Inception. And of course, that word inception tells us what the book is about. And an inception would be a new beginning. Something is happening. What's happening?
It's actually a play on words, and I have to give my wife Sharon credit for this. Like all the good ideas that come out of our house, it comes out of her head. It's also a play on the title of a recent science fiction film starring Leonardo DiCaprio called Inception, in which he developed technology that allowed him to implant ideas into the dreams of subjects in order to change their reality by changing what they believe to be true. And that relates to the subtitle of the book, Satan's Psyops from Eden to Armageddon. The enemy has been implanting false information and disinformation into humanity from the very beginning, starting in Genesis 3. Ye shall be as God. So Adam and Eve thought that by eating this particular fruit, they would be like God. It wasn't true, but they believed it to be true. They acted as though it were true, and of course, it didn't work out well for them or for us. What is coming, though, is the culmination of this long rebellion that the enemy has been working against their Creator, against God. They've been rebelling with the aid of human assistance. Some are willing participants in this rebellion. Others are, for lack of a better term, useful idiots because they don't understand the nature of the war in which all of us are deployed. The war is about the control of the mount of the congregation or the mount of the assembly. And the thing that when I began researching the book, I realized very quickly how important mountains are in human history and in biblical history. Mm-hmm. And, maybe it's the churches in which I grew up. I don't want to cast aspersions on any particular pastor or denomination, but I'd never really heard any teaching on the idea of holy mountains or the mount of the congregation.
Well, everybody knows about Mount Zion.
Mount Zion, of course.
Most important mountain in the Bible.
Right, and that is where the final battle will take place, Armageddon. It will not take place at Megiddo, and I can talk about that if you like. But
that'd be great. But what I wanted to get to right up front is Derek is very much attuned to the sci-fi situation that's evolving in modern society. Everything is happening at such a pace and at such a technical level that you can hardly understand what's being done anymore. Artificial intelligence, the changing of the human genome by artificial means. Invention is coming at lightning speed by computer. Everything is changing just rapidly, and in your book, you point out that Bible prophecy and the idea of a rapid, if you will, revolutionary change at the end time go hand in hand.
Sure. I mean, that's pretty obvious in the book of Daniel, where he talks about at the end, in the time of the end, knowledge will increase, people will be rushing to and fro, and certainly that describes the time in which we live better than any other age of human history. But it's the same old lie, just packaged in a new way, because the transhumanist movement, the development of artificial intelligence, and this desire on the part of researchers to develop an interface between the human mind and these artificial minds to enhance our capabilities, to make us as gods, is the same lie that Satan fed to Adam and Eve in the garden.
Yeah, if you could suddenly have an IQ of 1,000 via electronic means or some implant or other, you would be godlike. Mm-hmm. And I think that there are people that rather openly seek that.
What's funny about this, in kind of a darkly humorous way, is that some of the technologists leading the charge, such as Elon Musk, the technologist, has actually said that by developing artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. He said that in so many words. And yet, he believes we need to continue to develop this technology and find ways to merge our biology with that technology for the survival of the human race.
Yeah, and it's As a matter of fact, I happen to be familiar with the writings of some of the Greek philosophers and historians, and Hesiod, a very well-known Greek writer,
Yes.
has a chapter about demons.
Right.
And he says the demons are our friends.
Exactly. And what I found fascinating, and I don't mean to rabbit trail here, but this is
Well,
such a fascinating topic.
I was trying to stimulate your
Yeah.
imagination.
Well,
there.
you kicked it into overdrive there, because this is one of the things that really blew my mind in researching the book. Hesiod writes about the demons. He describes them as the spirits of the men who lived during the Golden Age.
Yes.
The Golden Age, which was ruled by Kronos. Now, Kronos was the leader of the old gods of the Greek, and I won't say mythology, the Greek religion. They believed it every bit as much as the Jews believed in Yahweh. The Greek religion. Of course, the Titans were punished by Zeus and the Olympians, where they were sent down to Tartarus. Now, the Bible tells us about a group that were sent down to Tartarus. 2 Peter 2:4 identifies the angels who sinned and were punished. Those are the angels mentioned by Jude in his epistle. Those are the angels from Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, who came down to earth, saw that the daughters of men were fair, took wives of all they chose, and from them came the Nephilim, the giants. The Nephilim were the men of the Golden Age. Their parents, if you will, were the Titans, the Watchers. And that it interlocks Greek mythology, Greek religion, with the Bible. But as I was looking into this, I found an article by a scholar by the name of Amar Anus. And everything that I drew upon in the Bible, or in the book, The Great Inception, when it wasn't from the Bible, was coming from secular, peer-reviewed research. Ancient history, ancient cosmology, ancient language. This scholar, about 1999, wrote a paper on the etymology of the word Raphaim, and speculated as to whether the Greeks knew about the Raphaim. Now, we know that not only did the Jews and the Hebrews know about the Raphaim, the Bible mentions them. Og, the king of Bashan, was the last of the remnant of the Raphaim.
Yes.
But the Canaanites knew who the Raphaim were, knew where they lived, knew where they were located. In fact, there was even a god in their pantheon called Raphaima, who was called the King of Eternity. He ruled over the land of the dead, and in an inscription that was just been deciphered within the last 50 years or so, his kingdom was centered at the cities of Ashtaroth and Edrei. Those are the same cities mentioned in the book of Exodus as being the seat of the kingdom of Og. In other words, Og of Bashan ruled over the entrance to the underworld. But that's what the Canaanites knew about the Raphaim. This scholar, Anus, asked, did the Greeks know about the Raphaim? And he makes the case that yes, they did, and showed from the etymology, the Semitic root word to the Greek. But in the course of making that case, he mentions that the Canaanite city-state of Ugarit, which is on the Syrian coast, it's on the Mediterranean. We started digging tablets out of the ground there about 90 years ago. They found a tablet that was only deciphered about 30 years ago, in which a ritual was recorded that was used to crown the new king of Ugarit. And in that ritual, essentially it was a necromancy ritual. They were summoning the spirits of the Raphaim, and they summoned the spirits of something called the Council of the Datanu to bless the new king. Now, the Datanu, according to Anus, and this is something historians who are familiar with the ancient Near East know, the Datanu was the name of a tribe of the ancient Amorites. The Amorites were one of the 7 nations that Joshua and the Israelites had to push out of the land of Canaan. The Datanu, according to everything I've been able to find, were so feared in the ancient world that the last Sumerian kings of Mesopotamia built a wall 175 miles long, to try to keep them out of southeastern Mesopotamia, where the Sumerian kings lived. They were ruling from the city of Ur, and they built this wall that stretched from the Euphrates across the Tigris to another river that today extends northeast out of Baghdad. It didn't work because the Amorites and this tribe, the Datanu, basically, by the time of Abraham, were in control of everything in the ancient Near East. That's how feared these were. But the ancient kings of Babylon, which was founded by the Amorites, the kings of the ancient Mesopotamian kingdom of Assyria, and the kings of Ugarit, who ruled about 400 or 500 years after Hammurabi the Great, they all traced their ancestry, their royal lineage, back to this tribe called the Datanu. And the thing that blew my mind in researching this ritual to summon the spirits of the Council of the Datanu was that this scholar shows etymologically that Datanu, the name of this ancient Amorite tribe, is the root word for the Greek word for their old gods, the Titans. The Titans were the Datanu, this ancient Amorite tribe. Again, this is not fringy internet conspiracy theory.
No.
This is not, we're going to put these things together because they sound alike. This is a credentialed scholar.
Yeah, it's where grammar meets history.
Exactly right. The neighbors of, and this was around the time of the judges, when the Israelites were trying to establish themselves in the land against the Canaanites who hadn't been pushed out. The Canaanite kings were apparently tracing their ancestry back to the Titans, the Watchers.
Well, Derek, it interests me a lot that there are many Christian writers touching on this subject right now. They talk about the days before the flood, when sons of God descended to the daughters of men, just totally corrupted society and races of, if you will, human alien beings. Made war all over the earth. It was just a mess, and it was so bad that God had to destroy it by water. And after the flood, they built the Tower of Babel. In my opinion, and the opinion of many of whom I've read lately, that the men of that day after the flood tried to resurrect the old conditions. They tried to get in touch with the old gods and bring them down once again.
Yes.
And God said, no, you can't do that. But then the thrust of many Christian books today is that this is happening right now via, if you will, science.
Right.
Science is being used to jumpstart the human connection with the old gods.
One of the things that that distinguished Babylon, and again, this Babylonian kingdom, the kingdom of Hammurabi the Great, which lasted through some ups and downs all the way down into the Persian period in the 6th century BC, when finally Cyrus the Great came in and took out the last king of Babylon, was founded by the Amorites. And what distinguished Babylon was they believed, was the fact that they had preserved knowledge from before the flood. Now, of course, since everyone died in the flood except for Noah and those on the ark, you have two options as to where that knowledge, how that knowledge was preserved. Either Noah or one of his kids brought it on the ark, which I don't believe, or they were in contact with entities who were not subject to the physical laws of nature, the fallen angels, the Watchers, other small g gods who brought this knowledge back to Babylon. And it was used by the Babylonians for their occult rituals, their occult practices, and so forth. In fact, that's why Moses made a point in the book of Exodus of specifying the dimensions of the bed of Og, the king of Bashan. He was an Amorite king, last of the remnant of Raphaim. His bed, 4 cubits by 9 cubits. Not coincidentally, that matches exactly the dimensions of the cultic bed of the god Marduk in the temple in Babylon, where once a year, during their New Year's festival, he would come down with his consort Sarpanit, they believed, and have ritual lovemaking to bless the kingdom of Babylon for the coming year. Moses was identifying Og as a practitioner of the occult wickedness of Babylon. That's why he mentions the dimensions of the bed. But that same knowledge, that forbidden knowledge that humanity was not meant to know in the age of before the flood, after the flood, or today, is being presented to us today. It's just now being couched in sort of a science fiction veneer. Artificial intelligence, radical life extension technologies and therapies, merging humanity, our biology, with technology. It's the same end result. Ye shall be as gods.
Wow, mouthful, but very evocative, because for the last 100 years or so, Christians have been looking at Bible prophecy and saying, all this has got to happen in a particular way, and shall we say, electronic data processing, before IBM, people could not even conceive of what we look at routinely today, going even to the genetic level, where the very nature of man himself might be changed. And suddenly, the threat of the old gods, the specter of the old gods, becomes very real.
Yes.
And that, by the way, is what Derek touches on in this book. You talk about this statement in Isaiah 14. It's on the cover of your book, Isaiah 14, 12 through 14. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I'll sit upon the mount of the congregation. I'll be like the Most High. that old contest between God and Satan is as big as ever.
Yes, and that is key to this to the book. Again, the importance of the Mount of the Congregation in this long war between the rebellious gods and God Most High. Isaiah 14 identifies his goal, the goal of Lucifer. You know, how thou art fallen, O Lucifer, son of the morning. Skipping to verse 13, I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. His goal is to be like God. The interesting thing that in researching this and looking at the Hebrew, that phrase, the sides of the north, in some of the more modern English translations, they actually translate it as the heights of Mount Zaphon. And in the book, I explain that Zaphon, and the first time we see that word is really in Exodus chapter 14, where God tells Moses to turn the Israelites around as they're escaping from Egypt, to turn around and camp facing a place called Baal Zaphon. Mount Zaphon is a mountain today called Jebel al-Akra. It's in Turkey, just across the border from Syria, on the coast of the Mediterranean. Everyone in the ancient world knew that was where Baal's palace was located, Mount Zaphon. Zaphon was so significant because of the constant conflict between Israel and the Baal worshippers, that Zaphon is actually the Hebrew word for the compass point north, because that mountain is north of Israel.
It's actually the Hebrew word for north.
Exactly.
But it's quite another thing to say, as it says in the King James, in the sides of the north. What do you mean when you say in the sides of the north? Or you might say in the uttermost reaches of the north.
Right.
But you're really almost touching on something extra-dimensional there.
Yes.
You're talking about reaching beyond.
Yes, and I think that relates to the Gog-Magog conflict of Ezekiel 38. The phrase in Isaiah 14, verse 13, and my Hebrew pronunciation is horrible, so forgive me for that. Yerikot Zaphon only appears 3 times in the Bible, once here in Isaiah 14. In Psalm 48, where the psalmist is comparing God's Mount of the Congregation, Mount of Assembly, Zion, with Mount Zaphon, to show Zion's superiority to Mount Zaphon, the home of the rebel gods. Ezekiel 38 uses the same phrase to describe the origin point of the hordes of Magog. Gog of Magog, his hordes coming from the uttermost parts of the north. It doesn't mean, in my view, the North Pole or the Arctic. It doesn't mean Russia. I believe they're referring to a cosmic north, if you will, perhaps an extra-dimensional location centered on this Mount of Assembly that was identified by Isaiah as the holy mountain of Baal, who Jesus identifies as Satan.
So would you be talking then about an extra-dimensional or portal, the idea of a portal that moves you into or opens a door which would allow traffic between that world and our world?
We're dealing with a supernatural enemy in the Gog-Magog conflict. And certainly there will be human actors, because these entities have always influenced human dupes. But I think when we look at Gog of Magog and try to identify a human actor, we may be missing the big picture.
Well, speaking of the big picture, I want you to comment on the gates of Baal that have been so much in the news lately. There are probably a lot of you out there who have not heard about this, but listen to Derek talk about this idea of insides or in the sides of the north compared with the worship of Baal.
Yeah, Baal was the Semitic storm god Hadad, and the storm god is also preeminent in the Greek religion. Zeus was Baal.
Yeah.
Zeus, Jupiter, Thor in the Germanic religions.
That's it.
There were Hurrian and Hittite versions.
By the way, they've made recently a couple of movies starring Thor.
Yes, they have.
And he's a hero.
Well, you know, and one of the other interesting things that you find out in the book there is that there's a Disney cartoon whose priests were slaughtered by Elijah on Mount Carmel, from Nephilim, god of Jezebel, to a Disney cartoon in only 2,800 years. There was a temple built to worship this storm god Hadad, called Baal, in the city of Palmyra, which was destroyed more or less. It just fell into ruins. There were still some artifacts left behind, including the archway leading to this temple in Palmyra. It was destroyed by the Islamic State over the last couple of years. but a replica was made using 3D printing technology and laser technology to cut stone into replicas of this arch. And it's been on display around the world, New York, London. They took it to the recent meeting of the G7 summit. So it has been making appearances around the world. Now, what does this mean from a spiritual standpoint? I'll be honest, I don't know. Is there something coming through that gateway? I don't know. But at the very least, what it's doing is desensitizing the world to think of this as anything more than just, oh, it's a piece of history. It's cultural. There's nothing more to it than that. Instead of saying, this was the archway, a gateway that led into the temple of a deity identified by Jesus himself as Satan.
Yes.
Who apparently, according to Isaiah and Ezekiel, is leading a rebellion that will culminate in the end times battle for the Temple Mount, which is where God has established his name forever. Temple Mount, from where he will rule. Yes. Over a new heaven and a new earth, the new Jerusalem. That is for all the marbles. And Satan has said that he wants to establish his mountain, his mount of the congregation, his mount of assembly, as the one from which all of creation will be ruled.
Now, Peter and Jude both speak of the evil ones who were locked deep, deep, deep in the deepest part of hell, until a particular time, the last days, when the if you will, the abyss would be opened up and much smoke would pour forth, and out would come the old ones, the old, if you will, the old gods back again.
Right.
So the Bible itself speaks of this.
Yes. So this isn't, again, trying to create a new mythology, and this isn't trying to read the Bible in a way to put things in the Bible that's not there. I don't pretend to be a scholar of the Bible. I just have pretty good reading comprehension. And I read the works of people who have been studying the Bible for years, like you, our friend Dr. Michael Heiser, whose research on the divine council worldview is foundational to this book. And then trying to look at the confrontations in the Bible that make more sense when you understand that these small g gods are real. They are literal evil intelligences who want to kill us and everything that we love. So why shouldn't we try to understand better what their motivations are, what they're trying to accomplish, and what is going to happen in the prophetic word that God has left for us in his Bible?
And the book is The Great Inception by Derek Gilbert. And Derek, surprisingly, the time has flown. We have just a few minutes. Put a cap on all this. Where does the book take the reader?
It basically goes through from Eden through the mountains that I find to be historically significant and explains why each of those mountains is significant. Of course, Eden being the origin point of all of this. Mount Hermon, which not only was where the Watchers descended, but it was considered in Canaanite religion and the rest of the ancient Near East to be the mount of assembly for the creator god in the Canaanite pantheon, El, where he resided with his 70 sons. Of course, Babel was the artificial mountain that Nimrod tried to create to bring the gods back to earth, to reestablish contact after the flood. That's a good way of putting it. Mount Zaphon, of course, the holy mountain of Baal, also of Zeus. Mount Sinai, where God began the process of getting humanity back to his mountain Zion, where, interestingly, not only did he give Moses the law and the plans for the tabernacle, but he had Moses, Aaron's sons, and the 70 elders of Israel come up the mountain and eat a meal with him. That number 70 is significant, and I explain why in the book. Of course, Mount Zion. And then there's another mountain that we don't often overlook, and I almost overlooked this one, Mount Carmel, where there was that confrontation between Elijah and the prophets of Baal. I explain why the prophets of Baal were actually the prophets of a Disney character.
Yes, very interesting.
But and then, of course, Jabal al-Nur, which is the mountain outside Mecca where Muhammad heard from something. I don't believe it was the angel Gabriel. It identified itself as Gabriel. Yeah. But it gave him what we now know as the Quran. Again, it's always about these mountains and the interaction between humans and these entities, and of course God himself on his holy mountain. But the final battle will be fought at Zion. The Bible tells us that the phrase translated Mount of the Congregation or Mount of Assembly is Har Moed. When transliterating it from Hebrew to Greek, the Hebrew character ayin is transliterated into the Greek gamma, and so Har Moed becomes Har Megiddon. And so we've been taught for years that it's going to be fought at Megiddo, the Mount of Megiddo. But Megiddo's a plain. There's no mountain there.
The only mountain there would be Mount Carmel, which is at one end of,
Right.
of a large valley, but you really can't call it
The mountain of
a
Megiddo.
mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Mount Zion, of course, when you look at the apocalyptic prophecies in the Old Testament, they are always focused on Jerusalem. Why? Because that's where God's holy mountain is located. That's where Armageddon will be fought. And that's why even today, as we record this, there is so much fighting and violence taking place over who controls Mount Zion and the Temple Mount.
Again, we're running out of time, and I regret this, down to around 3 minutes, but you just opened up a new subject, the Middle East. Everybody picks up the paper. We're all watching the Middle East. Give us like a 2-minute Derek Gilbert version of why the things that are happening there now are important to watch.
Well, it's because the enemy knows that Mount Zion is the center of, well, it's the center of creation, basically. It's where God has established his name, and the enemy wants to take that away. That is why, regardless of what battles are being fought between Sunnis and Shias, or the Islamic State and other Sunnis that they don't consider religious enough, ultimately it's going to turn on Zion. And again, that's where the final battle will be fought. We will see the drive continue among Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox Jews to construct the third temple. And of course, we know that will be politically problematic, to say the least. More violence is coming, and it's all going to focus on the final battle coming to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem.
You know, what's fascinating about this to me is that we are approaching that time that Christians have watched for. There's growing excitement. We believe in the pre-tribulational rapture of the church. And we believe that the tribulation will be a period on a scale of shaking the world. It'll be right up there with the Great Flood, perhaps even worse. If you read the Bible literally, it just says it's going to be the worst thing that ever happened. So we're headed for a great shaking when the powers that are on high will actually do battle with each other.
Right.
The armies of Satan, the armies of Michael, things that we can hardly imagine. You have to go into the sci-fi world to even begin to conceive of this, right?
Yes, yes. And what's incredible is that we're here for this time.
Yeah.
And as our friend Dr. Michael Lake has said, we have been chosen for whatever reason God has. We've been chosen for this time. And meanwhile, the apostles and the prophets who looked forward to this day are leaning over the rails of heaven and cheering us on.
Amen. The book is The Great Inception. What we like to do here at Prophecy Watchers is put things in packages. And we've put together some things here for you called the Coming Chaos Package. And here's the situation. We have a magazine called The Prophecy Watcher, which we'd love for you to read every month. And you can subscribe to it for life. Yeah. And if you do so, we're going to give you an additional bonus. We're going to give you Derek's book and a DVD called Inhuman, which basically in DVD form tells the same sort of story from a scientific position.
Right. The danger of the transhumanist movement, again, is just a science fiction repackaging of the old lie, ye shall be as gods.
Derek, thanks for being with us today.
My honor. I enjoyed it.
Love to talk to you. And it's happening, folks, right in front of our very eyes. Keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody.